Hey, lead learners, welcome to the Learning Lab, the podcast dedicated to empowering educational leaders like you to lead with capacity, competency, and confidence. I'm Dr. Lisa Weir, aka Lead Learner Lisa, and I am your host. And in each episode, we'll explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of education. Whether you're a seasoned administrator, an aspiring principal, or a teacher leader, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and practical advice. We believe that strong leadership is the cornerstone of successful schools and thriving students, and we are here to support you on your journey. Join us as we dive into conversations with visionary educators, share real-world success stories, and provide actionable tips to enhance your leadership skills. Together, we'll build a community of lead learners committed to making a lasting impact in education, changing lives, and making futures one mind at a time. So let's get started and lead the way to a brighter future for our students and our schools. Hey, lead learners, I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm excited to have Dr. Saudia Twine join me in the Learning Lab today. Dr. Saudia Twine is a licensed professional counselor and marriage and family therapist. She specializes in attachment work and emotional wellness. Dr. Twine has been featured in Forbes and Men's Health, and she is the author of Get Naked, Learning to Love Again Without Fear. Dr. Twine is dedicated to helping individuals and couples build fulfilling personal and professional relationships through healthy emotional expression and attachment-based tools. Dr. Twine is also the founder of New Beginnings, Fresh Start Counseling Group, Eros Meets Agape, and Attachment University, a heart-centered educational platform and emotional growth. Dr. Twine leads workshops, coaching programs, and training that center upon healthy emotional expression, relational intimacy, and trauma recovery. Dr. Twine, welcome, and thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab today to talk about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Weir. I'm excited to be here. I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation that I think a number of people will be able to benefit from. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and maybe if we have a little bit of extra time, we could talk a little bit about Get Naked, Learning to Love Again. That is a very, very interesting title of a book. So I'm going to have to go to Amazon and order that because it sounds like something that would be an interesting read. But let's start off now by sharing with our listeners what we mean when we talk about emotional intelligence. In 2019, Lauren Landry wrote an article, Why Emotional Intelligence is Important in Leadership. And the article really highlighted that you could have technical skills that might help you secure the job. It even might help you secure your first promotion. However, if you aspire to be in a leadership role, especially if you aspire to be in the leadership role long term, there's an emotional element to consider, and that's what they call emotional IQ. So, what is emotional IQ? Well, the definition is the ability to understand and manage your emotions. And here's the key for leadership, as well as influence the emotions around you. So, Dr. Twine, you're an expert in emotional wellness. So, please share some of the thoughts that you have relative to emotional IQ and maybe some tips for professionals relative to healthy emotional expression.
I find that in general, and you have to know in advance, I use a lot of acronyms. It's just easy to help people to remember. So in general, most people, they have a baseline level of emotional intelligence. However, that baseline is really only good enough for them to know how to do what they normally do in a setting where their emotions are overwhelmed. That doesn't mean that it's good. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that they have a habit of how they handle themselves. The issue is that we need to become effective in managing our emotions as well as being able to help others with theirs. Not saying that you have to be a therapist, but really being able to assist in a way that is helpful in that environment. And I like to use the acronym OARS. So being able to observe what is happening within yourself as well as within others so that you can know what's happening in your environment. Then being able to assess, well, what emotion is that? Because this is how this emotion causes me to feel. And then taking it to the next step, which is being able to regulate that emotion, whether it's within self or with other. And then using that time in that moment to be able to share. It allows us to be able to calm down to, again, I would say, further that the ability to be able to regulate.
Yeah, it sounds like if I'm hearing you correctly, every day on a regular basis, kind of when we're in our homes or things that we're used to, and we're just going throughout the routines of our day, there we have a way of how we regulate our own emotions. But when we're maybe in a different environment, like a work environment or a school environment, if you're a school principal and you have different things going on around you, things that you don't necessarily have control over, what's happening or what someone's going to do or say, that's where emotional intelligence and that ability to be able to regulate really is important.
True, but I would like to say that it's also important. It's really important in all aspects of our relationships, whether it's personal, romantic, or professional. Being able to have effective and efficient emotional intelligence really helps you to be able to thrive in your world because it allows you to be able to communicate with someone and understand where they are. In most cases, people want to feel loved, valued, which in essence means they want to feel heard, understood, and be validated. And that is the basic element of attachment. Attachment is with us from the cradle to the grave. From the time you became 18 months old, your attachment identification was formed, and it is how you have learned how to think, interpret, as well as to communicate when it comes to being able to understand another, as well as to be able to express love. Some people might say, well, is love needed in a work environment? It's not that love is needed in a work environment. It's the fact that we were just built and made to be relational. If we think about it, the worst thing you can do to somebody as far as punishment, whether when you were a child or whether someone is in prison, is to isolate them, right? So in prison, they put them in solitary confinement. That's the worst thing that they can do, right? Especially when they have it for extended periods of time. Again, for children, giving them a timeout, making them be by themselves. These are the worst things because we were meant to be relational. We need to be able to relate with others with regard to emotion. And when we form or have our attachment identification form, that is what causes us to be able to communicate with someone. But when emotions are involved, whether that is a supervisor or a coworker that's getting on our last nerve, or whether it is your spouse that has just for the last time, it's like an alarm system. Attachment is an alarm system. So the alarm goes off, and you're trying to do everything you can to silence the alarm. When we have healthy tools to do that, then we know how to use that acronym ORS. When we don't have healthy tools to do that, then we may use one or two maybe elements from ORS, or we may not use it at all. And that's where people struggle. And that's where in a work environment, we create a culture that is not comfortable to share. A lot of women are leaders now in the workforce. And I would say that probably in the past, I don't have statistics on this, but if I just look at just any type of theoretical base, they're mostly, let's just say, created by men. And as a result, in the work environment, emotions were not necessarily welcome, but people assume, well, when we have emotions in the work environment, that there must be some type of crying or, acquiescing in some type of congenial way. That's not what it means. Everybody uses emotions in the workplace. When you get mad at someone, or when you are afraid to tell someone something or speak up, there are emotions. So it's all about understanding what emotions are, and in many cases, people don't recognize that there's a difference between emotions and feelings. And that's where people kind of get lost in, as far as not using the workplace to have certain things to come up. Feeling is just how I feel about something. That is always invited into the workplace. Emotion is how I'm going to should I say, communicate and react to that experience. But if I have an insecure attachment style, it does not allow me to be able to communicate or signal to you that there is an issue in a healthy way.
I like that. And I never really thought about the difference between emotion and feelings. And feelings is kind of what you have internally, and emotion is kind of how it gets expressed outwardly. I also like, you brought up culture, and in schools, culture is so important. And a lot of school leaders, and especially new leaders, can sometimes struggle with culture and climate. Or you can even come into a school setting or an organizational setting where there already is some culture and climate issues, and you're really trying to change that and turn that around. Also, when I think about the climate of education today, we have a teacher shortage, and teachers don't feel valued. Teachers, they don't make a lot of money. And one of the things that when coaching leaders and mentoring leaders, we really talk about how important that relationship piece is, and developing the relationship with the staff that you serve. Because really, if you take care of your staff, that's your who. If you take care of the staff that you're serving as a leader, they will take care of your why, which is our students, and make sure that we have the outcomes that we want. One of the key things about leadership that I really like to highlight for leaders, new leaders, and aspiring leaders is that influence is a major component of leadership. And when I spoke of the definition of emotional IQ a little bit earlier, it talked about a person's ability to influence others and to influence others' emotions. Can you share your thoughts or some tips for leaders about influencing the emotions or managing the emotions of those that they serve and supervise?
Sure. So I think the baseline is what type of cultural environment do I want to create? And it's been a minute since I've been in a corporate setting, but I believe there used to be the doors always open theory or
Mm-hmm.
concept, or the glass door. And as a result, that allows an individual to assume that this is an open environment. But I know many of people who had that type of environment but did not feel comfortable enough to go and speak to their supervisor. And that's because the culture had not been created. The culture cannot be created by a concept, it must be created by that leader. And if a leader is not able to communicate effectively, then it does not allow coworkers, subordinates, or what have you to be able to feel comfortable enough to express themselves. Most people who, regardless of the environment, professional, relational, or romantic, most people, if we do not feel comfortable enough to share, then it causes a disruption within the relationship. A lot of people assume that in a work relationship, I tell you to do something, you're going to be okay with it. So let's kind of use a couple of examples. Oprah, as well as Google, are the top two companies where it's hard for them to really be able to hire in certain areas because they're so happy at that place that no one wants to leave. Why? Is it because they are just loving their job every single day? Even if you are called to that job, you don't really get excited about it every day, right? And it's because of the environment that was created. In essence, when you have an environment where people feel safe enough to share, it means that first you have modeled that before them. You did not just state it, but you've modeled it. You've showed them what it looks like. And people assume that if emotions are in the workplace, that it's going to be some type of just chaotic experience. That is not it. It means that it is okay for me to share here. And when we feel, going back to being valued, heard, understood, and validated, right? It means that I feel safe enough to share that even if you don't go along with what it is that I am saying, I still feel as if my voice was heard, or I feel seen in this environment. Even if you don't agree with it, you don't go along with it, or you go in an entirely different direction, you've allowed me to feel as if it is safe enough to share. And once we create that baseline of safety, it allows people to be able to express themselves. Most people in any type of work environment, they're going to feel comfortable enough to come to work and be themselves, unless that glass door really does not exist. It means that I can't be myself in this environment. And that's what kind of, I would say, disrupts our ability to really be able to create a safe culture and environment. And then there are just various steps to do that, that move away from a romantic element. Because again, It's not about that. There's a difference again between feelings and emotions. Emotions, that is my body. The body keeps score. The body is the one that's able to, regulate emotions, right? So when it comes to emotions, emotions are my body's initial reaction to something. Feelings are the meaning that I place upon those emotions, right? So in a work environment, any type of emotion is going to take place because we are just natural human beings and we will respond to things in a happy or unhappy way. But the meaning that I place to it will cause the environment or that culture to change. And that's where a number of leaders need to do a little bit more work on so that they're allowing their subordinates or employees to be able to feel safe enough to express themselves, be themselves, and know that it still does not affect our environment, but it helps us to gel together as one in this environment.
Yeah, I really like that about safety. I can't remember the author of this model, but it was a SCARF model, and the S stood for status. So in this case, leaders recognize that they have a certain status, and the C was for certainty. So your employees being able, you're predictable, you're consistent, you do what you say that you're going to do, and the A was for autonomy. So giving that voice and allowing people some creativity within, the non-negotiables that you might have there. And then, of course, the R was the relational piece, which you've talked a lot about here. And finally, the F. And when I think of it, I think a cozy scarf, making someone feel safe and warm. And the F, the fairness play, the fairness, making sure that you treat everybody fairly and consistently. And when people feel like they're safe and it's a safe place to be, and they feel, even you talked earlier about that open door, right? You can have your door open all day long, but if people don't feel safe to come and talk to you, no one's going to walk through that door. Or if they walk through the door to talk to you and you don't show them that what they are saying to you has enough value. So a lot of times what I find, and even as a leader early in my career, I was probably guilty of this, where, I'm working on my computer, I'm doing an email, someone asks me, can they ask me a question or talk to me for a second? And I'm like, sure. And they come on in, but I stay and I'm still typing that email. I'm listening to them, I'm responding to them, but I didn't stop and turn and listen to them so that they knew that there was value in what they said, that I understood what they said and that I valued enough to pause for a minute and just kind of listen to them. So thank you. Those are some great tips. Now, one of the things that is really, really critical in leadership when, for instance, if someone's hiring for a principal or looking for a leader, is that they look for that emotional IQ. I think it's Mark Murphy that writes a book about hiring for attitude. However, sometimes we may have the high emotional IQ as the leader or the principal, but our staff may not, right? You're going to work with people who, quite frankly, you may not like them. And hey, they may be a very high performing teacher or high performing staff member, but they may have some relational flaws, or maybe sometimes even be to the point of they're kind of toxic to the culture. What tips or thoughts do you have for leaders relative to supervising and supporting maybe a staff member, a teacher, or someone that has very low emotional IQ, not able to manage their emotions? What tips, especially related to how that leader might be able to support and help that person develop those skills?
So I think it's all about workplace connection. And again, I think in order for you to help an individual, you have to have the greater picture in mind.
Mhm.
What type of environment do I want to have, right? Everyone comes from a different background, education, experience, and work history. And I don't know all of those things. Some of those things could have been harmful or traumatic or wonderful, and I don't compare, right? Or this environment does not compare. So I think first it's about understanding an individual or taking the time to learn them, to understand them, and not just assume that the face that is before you, that is who they are. Sometimes it is a result of their prior experiences, whether good or bad. And sometimes it's about things that we've done. So it's about first getting an understanding, knowing the environment that I want to create, but understanding that individual, and then kind of being a model, so to speak. And I think part of me, just as a counselor, when I sit with an individual or if I'm with a group, my job the entire time I'm assessing, even if I'm teaching, I'm trying to assess to see what's going on and how do I make that environment work in the way that I need it to work or what it is that they're requiring of me. So if we look at, there's this concept of most people have heard of love languages, but there are also workplace love languages. Now, this is just me because I believe in attachment. There is not one experience that I cannot look at attachment to be the baseline for why someone chooses to think, interpret, and communicate the way that they do. It is always going to go back to attachment. And if I understand someone's attachment style, I automatically know how to communicate with them because I know the gaps in between. Employees that have, let's just say, I don't know the baseline of everyone's understanding, but when we look at avoidant attachment individuals are 70% men, 30% women. In most cases, it means that they grew up in a household where love was not communicated, it was not seen, it was not experienced. And as a result, they are very quiet about their emotions. It does not mean that they don't feel. I personally believe that avoidants feel more so than any other individual. And it's because they know what's happening, they know what's going on, but they do not communicate because they don't have practice and history of doing that. So they're very self-conscious about communicating in that manner. And therefore, they look as if they're very closed off, but they are in tandem with you in the conversation. You just never hear it because they're going to say it in their head because they don't have the confidence to believe that they will communicate it correctly if they actually tell you that. A person that is individual with anxious attachment, it means they grew up in a household where there was consistency with inconsistency. Therefore, whether the individual who was their primary caregiver was, let's just say, emotionally present on Tuesday, physically absent on Thursday, Saturday, giving them a mix of signals. It calls them to know, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm the problem here because they are able to do this because I've seen it from them. However, when it doesn't happen, maybe I'm the culprit. So it causes them to have some type of self-doubt. I'm coming to a point here. When we have secure attachment says, I'm okay. I'm able to be all right in my own feelings. I'm able to see someone in theirs and be empathetic towards them and communicate that. I'm okay with being by myself. I'm okay with being in a relationship. So how or why would I connect that to a workplace environment? In essence, you have an attachment style of an individual. That is how they have learned how to perceive, evaluate, and respond to the experiences in their environment. So when I hear someone talking, based on my attachment style, I'm automatically going to filter the content based on how I am believing about myself in a positive or negative way, or about another individual in a positive or negative way. So think of it in this sense. Most people, I don't know about younger generation, but when I was younger, they did this little game when we were little. They gave the person at the front of the class, the teacher would whisper in their ear and tell them a sentence and do that all. And then you had to do the entire sentence the same way, all the way through
Right.
to the last person. That person stood up. When they always said the sentence, it was never the sentence that I heard.
Telephone game or something like that call.
I'm
Yeah.
like, where did you get that from? That is not what was told to me. Well, what happened? When we got that information in our head, we had to figure out how to communicate that in our own words. We changed the meaning. Why? Because it was based on how I perceived the message to be. So if I take that back to a work environment, when someone is communicating, I'm perceiving certain things about them that are not even based on them. As a result, I'm going to evaluate them based off of what I have perceived, even though I may be wrong, and I'm going to evaluate them based on that and then choose to respond to them in a way that fits with me. I'm either going to be quiet and not say anything because that's what I'm accustomed to from my household, or I'm going to speak up because I've decided no one's going to treat me like that because I've had that happen before, right? And how I respond is based on how I have already felt about myself and about you, which is all coming from our attachment style. Well, in a work environment, that's not necessarily true. So we're already starting off on the wrong foot. So as a leader, getting back to what you asked, I'm gonna lay that little line. As a leader, in knowing that, It means that even though I'm communicating with someone, I cannot automatically assume that they heard me or another individual in the way that the person intended it. From there, I cannot assume that they are going to be responsible enough or aware enough with their own emotions to regulate in the moment, get back to baseline, being okay, to then respond to me in a way that is appropriate. I can't assume that, because if they didn't have that skill set in childhood, they don't have a history of knowing how to practice that now. So they're going to be deficient in that area. So as a leader, it is now my responsibility to say, well, what can I do to make this a safe work environment? I'm not trying to be your best friend. I'm just trying to make this a safe work environment that everyone would want to come to. And that goes to workplace connection, which I mentioned earlier with regard to our workplace love languages. Most people, I believe, know about the 5 love languages that are based on Dr. Gary Chapman. He did it with couples in marriage and family therapy over 25 years ago, recognizing everyone has a baseline or type of love language. And based on that love language, it is how you hear love being communicated. But in a work environment, it's not necessarily love. People think love has to always be about an eros or erotic kind of love or passionate love. It doesn't mean that. There are other types of love. So if I'm looking at it in a connection aspect, then I should be looking at it in the sense from a workplace love language. And the 5 love languages are receiving of gifts. I generally always tend to forget one because there's no order, and I tend to remember things in order. So we're going to see what we do here. It's receiving of gifts, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and words of affirmation. Okay, I got all 5. Okay. With those 5, when it comes to a workplace love language, the only one that is removed is physical touch. We live in a Me Too moment, right? So, and we go around touching people, all right? We don't want to be called into HR. But the concept with the 4 that are remaining in a work environment, again, love language is how I perceive I am being valued or cared for, right? So in a work environment, if I know I have an employee that says that, well, I know that their love language is words of affirmation, then, it's always about, well, good job, Melissa. You did wonderful on that presentation. I really enjoyed how you da 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 da, right? If I do that enough, it's exactly like when we have children and we're teaching them different skills. Great job, right? That makes them feel so good about themselves. It builds their courage up, their belief in themselves up, and they want to do it again. You ever notice kids start learning how to count and you're like, oh, count to 10. Oh, look at you. Great job, right? Then they get to 100. Next, you've built them up so much. Now they're always in your face. You want to hear me count. You really like, no, I don't. Right? But you're like, sure, because up, right? It's a part of our ego. And it's nothing wrong with that. So if I know that Melissa's love language, workplace love language is words of affirmation, then I should be acknowledging Melissa in that area. When it's time for a presentation, or everyone needs to hear Melissa's presentation on such and such because it is a wonderful asset to the corporation. Yet it's going to encourage Melissa to do better. Melissa is going to excel in this area because she recognizes that I recognize her. But if someone might be listening and say, well, Dr. Twine, how are you going to figure out quality time in the workplace? Well, it's still possible, right? So maybe I sit down with my employee a few minutes before we begin work. Maybe during lunch, we have lunch together at the end of the day. Or maybe I know that they are a single mom and they need to get their child at such and such time. So we work out an arrangement where they can still take care of work, but I allow them certain privileges because I understand their situation. The whole point is, with regard to these love languages that are workplace love languages, it helps you to connect to the individual and allow them to feel seen, heard, and validated. When you allow someone to feel seen, heard, and validated, then it is a way that you are connecting with them. And once you're able to connect with an individual, it allows you to be able to have this understanding between one another that they are there for you, you are there for them. It is a safe place. They can come to you in times of trouble. You will hear them out. If there is an issue, they can come to you. But also, if they're struggling on something, they know, you know what, this is a secure base from where I start from. I know I can go out here and do this thing because this person supports me. And then I know that they are here for me. I see them. And then at the same time, I also hear them knowing that they're available. And all of these 3 points are baseline foundations for what we identify as attachment and our security in that.
Yeah, it really communicates to your staff that you're showing up for them. And you made a point about quality time and showing quality time. I think the example I gave earlier, where early in my leadership, someone would come into my office and like, sure, come on in. And they're talking to me, but I'm still writing or typing on my computer. Just pausing and giving them a moment of my time to hear them shows that I'm taking time for them and giving them some quality time. You lifted up a lot of great pieces of information. I want to make sure our lead learners take that away. I heard you talk about individuals. And so as a leader, as a principal, making sure that you understand that you have a staff, that's one word, but that staff is made up of individuals. And really, I also heard you say it's important to get to know your staff as individuals. They communicate different, they have different work language, they want to be appreciated differently. And so not only recognizing that they're individuals, but taking the time to get to know them.
Mhm.
Another thing you talked about are perceptions. So how we might perceive something. And there's an exercise that I have leaders do where they're really reflecting to really see what I call the lenses that they perceive things through, the way that they filter, whether it's something someone does or something someone says or something that has happened. The way that we filter that is based on our own experiences, which really shape our perception. And as a leader, you have to understand that you have to be able to sit back and reflect and say, am I filtering this through my perception, or am I really seeing what truly is going on here, or what someone is really truly trying to communicate to me? And you said something else too. You used the word assume. And I like to think about in leadership and just in relationships in general, that we assume good intentions, especially in schools, that we assume, we don't right away jump to thinking that someone did something such a way that they wanted to hurt us or hurt a situation or to be negative, but really try to find out what someone's intention was and have that conversation with them. And up until that point, really try to assume good intentions before jumping to any conclusions. So, a lot of really great information. There's really no way that you're going to take the human out of human beings. And in schools and in leadership, that's exactly what you're working with. You're working with human beings who have emotions, who have feelings, who are different, who come from different backgrounds, who communicate differently. And as a leader, you really have to have that skill, that emotional IQ to really bring all that together. So I love all of that and some great advice from Dr. Twine. Again, she is on Instagram, Attachment University. You can search I'm going to go out and buy that book because it sounds like a very interesting book. And I know that you do a lot of trainings at schools and sometimes as leaders, if we don't have that background, we may not always know how to kind of build that culture of safety. And so having professionals such as Dr. Twine that can come in and help with that is always a great thing. And it's always a great time to talk with you. I really want to thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab. I hope that you will come back soon and share your experiences and wisdom with us.
Oh, I'd love to come back. That would be great.
Thank you. And lead learners, it's that time again. It's time for us to hang up our lab coats until next time. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Instagram at One Mind Ed Consulting LLC. Please like and share. And be sure to check out my successful tips on Mondays. And until next time, lead, learn, and love, saving lives and making futures one mind at a time.